What's up everyone and welcome back. I'm Earl the Rookie Woodworker, and for today's video I'm going to show you how I made this board. Let's get to it. Alright, so this is my wood selection. I got maple, sapele, walnut, and cherry. I think I'm going to need some more maple later. I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, let's go. Alright, so this board seems like a simple ingrain board, but it does kind of have a little bit of an awkward factor to it. With this pattern being the way that it is, I have to glue up this board extra wide because we have to cut the strips long ways to glue it together. So the width of the first glue up has to be at least the width of the entire piece when it's finished, plus a couple inches for the cutoffs for the ends. Now you'll notice that as I'm cutting these pieces out, my shop is suddenly taken over by what looks like a giant sandstorm. So what I did is I immediately went over and I shut off my dust collection system, and then I paced back and forth, flapping my arms around like I just walked through a spider web. Like I was going to do something for me, but it was doing nothing at this point. So then as the dust settled, I went over to have a look and see what happened, and it turns out that my dust collection bag fell off a little bit, and this was a good time to have an air filter, that's for sure. So that was a mess. Basically the bag popped off of the dust collector there. You can see it hanging down here, slipped out of underneath the clamp, and the dust collector was on, of course, and it just blew dust all across everything. Got quite a mess here all over. Yeah, so that just made this day a little longer. Yeah. So I had about a 3-hour mess to clean up there, but after about an hour and a half I decided to take a break and actually get back to what I was doing. So I took everything that I cut up over to the jointer, where I gave everything a flat bottom and a straight side. Now that I have a flat bottom and a straight side, I can put that against the fence and the table saw and rip all of these down into 1.5-inch strips. Alright, so this is the pieces I just cut up on the table saw. Did a quick look over it, and I found something interesting with the sapele, and that's that all the sapele has these cracks right down the middle of the piece, and they stop before the end of the wood. But it's right there in the middle, except for this piece. This piece here goes to the end, but I don't know if it went to the end, if it just finished cracking out to the end after I was done, but I definitely didn't catch that before I started cutting it up, mainly because it's all in the middle. That's a new thing to me, so this stuff is not good for this project. I will have to set to the side. I don't know what I'd use it for, and to be honest, let me know what you would use it for in the comments below, because right now I'm thinking this is a waste of about $7 worth of wood. Darn it! So I gotta do that again. Zoink! Zoink! Nom nom! Nom nom! Nom nom! Nom nom! Nom nom! Zip! 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 Alright, so these look a lot better. Yeah. That was some pretty funny sounding equipment I had there. I'm just joshing you. I actually made those sounds with my face, believe it or not. But at this point, I'm going to lay out the pattern I want to glue this stuff up into. Then I'm going to flip all of the pieces on the side and spread some glue out on it with a roller, like an adult for a change. Then after I get a nice even spread of glue, I'm going to flip them all back over, put them back tight together, and then I'm going to clamp them tight together to each other. Contrary to what you might believe, you don't need a ton of clamping pressure if you got two properly jointed surfaces that you're clamping together. In fact, this is how I thought you had to do it when I first started. Alright, so I got that in the clamps. It is gluing up. It is drying out. By tomorrow I'll be able to run it through the drum sander, get it perfectly flat on both sides, and then be able to chop it up, slice and dice it, and glue it all together. But I want to put some thin strips, like some 1/4 inch strips of light color wood. I think I'm going to go with a maple for that again. That goes between all of those strips. But yeah, I'll glue up another board of maple, basically make a cutting board out of maple. It'll be kind of awkward in dimensions, but then I'll be able to run it over the table saw, cut some thin strips off of it, so I can have some 1/4 inch strips to go ahead and put in this board. So yeah, basically you have to make 2 boards to make this, but it's fairly simple still. Let's get to it. So I'll square up an end and start slicing and dicing some of this maple. I need enough to glue up a board the same length as the finished piece. And then it's just more of the same story like the other part of the board. And then what I'm going to do here is use a drum sander to get both these boards flat. Now if you don't have a drum sander, you might want to use a router sled to do this, or slice it up and plane it. Now when I go to rip this down into slices, the first cut I need to be nice and square, and there's nothing better to make a nice square cut than a nice square crosscut sled. So then I do that until this piece gets pretty thin and a little bit uncomfortable in the crosscut sled. At that point I switch over to putting the table saw fence back on, and then I cut the rest of the strips out on the regular table saw. Then rinse and repeat with the other board. So the original plan was to glue this up again into an end grain board and then use the table saw to cut these strips out. But instead I decided to go with a bandsaw and just cut all the strips in half. Which does seem like a good idea, but in my case it's not. Let me explain. See, in my case I have a bearing that's going bad in the bandsaw, which is causing the blade to not track quite right, which is why I'm not using the fence here and I'm kind of free feeding it. But it also causes some excess heat to get into the blade. I took my time here, but this can cause the blade to break, so I do not recommend doing this. But I made it through, and this thing will sit until a new bearing arrives. But then I was able to thin them down to 3/8 of an inch thick on the drum sander. And now it is finally time for the final glue up. For gluing up cutting boards, I always used Type Bond Type 3 because it's the FDA approved glue. It also has a lower temperature threshold that you can let it sit in the garage. It has a 45-degree threshold, where the Type 2 has a 55-degree threshold, and I think the original has like a 60-degree threshold. So this one here is a little bit better for a climate like Pennsylvania. It's also the only one of the 3 that is waterproof, so that's another reason why I go with this glue for cutting boards. Now to get my wavy pattern, I had to misalign all of my colorful pieces by a 1/2 inch, and I was careful to do a nice little wave at the ends to get that pattern exact. Then at the end we'll just chop them ends right off. Alright, so this thing has made it through its final glue up. I'm ready to get this thing flattened out on the drum sander. Then I'm going to chop the ends off of it and yeah, get it sanded and finished. I love the drum sander, but I kind of halfway think I prefer the router sled over the drum sander for this part of the process. Then I'll just use the crosscut sled to lop the ends of these board off. Like butter. And then it's time to start the dreaded sanding process. Now with this board, I didn't do anything special with it. I didn't do a juice groove. I didn't put feet on the bottom of it. I didn't even put handles on this thing. So there is nothing on this board that distracts from the pattern itself. So tell me in the comments below what you prefer on your own board. Do you like a juice groove? Do you like to have feet on one side of it? Or do you like to have the usability of both sides of it? Do you like to have handles that are grooved into the side of the board? Give me your thoughts on that in the comments below. And then this is my favorite part. This is where you get to see your board come to life when you oil it up. I'm basically just rubbing some mineral oil into the wood, and then I'm going to let that sit overnight, let it soak into the wood nice and good. Then I'll come back and buff whatever's left, into the wood, or basically off of the wood, and then I will cover it with some board butter, which is basically mineral oil and beeswax mix, and then I will buff that into the wood. And this is how it turned out. I really enjoyed this project. I think I'll do more boards of a pattern similar to this down the road. But if you like this video, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and then hit that notification bell, because I got a lot of other videos that are just like this one. Well, they're not all like this one. I got some other builds and some other types of projects too. So swing on over to the channel and check it out. Till next time, make something awesome.